Hello, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls. Welcome to VUX World, the Practical Voice Podcast. This episode of VUX World is brought to you by the Conversational Academy. If you're looking to upskill and get yourself trained in what it takes to be a conversation designer and learn all of the ins and outs and details about the kind of things that you'll be doing as a conversation designer, you should check out the Conversational Academy. It is the single central place that I would recommend for any budding conversation designer. Even if you are a conversation designer, there'll be things in there that you probably aren't aware of, and there'll be things that you can learn that will improve what you do. It's an online course. You can do it at your own pace, and if you use the promo code in the website, or on our website rather, on the show notes for this podcast and on the webpage, then you can save 10% on the cost. So check it out. On this week's episode, we're speaking to the founding father, or one of the founding fathers, of Amazon Alexa, Jeff Adams. Jeff now has a company called Cobalt Speech, and he essentially creates voice assistants for anybody who wants a voice assistant. But he was there at the beginning. He was at the company that was acquired by Amazon that then turned into the Echo and Alexa. His story is absolutely fascinating. We get into detail about what it was like when Jeff Bezos and the Amazon team communicated their vision for the Echo and what it was intended to be and what they wanted it to be to Jeff and the team, who were at a company called Yap that was then acquired, that became Amazon Alexa. And we talk through the whole origin story. We document the whole process from being acquired all the way through, more or less, to launching the Echo. And we also speak about the work that he's doing recently, that Jeff's doing recently with Cobalt Speech, which is absolutely fundamentally interesting. Ladies and gentlemen, without further ado, this is Jeff Adams, the founding father of Amazon Alexa, on VUX World.
VUX World. VUX World. VUX World. VUX World. Branding with the big faces. I love listening to it.
Kane Sims.
Kane Sims, the one and only.
Britain's finest, Mr. Kane Sims.
Dustin Coates.
I like it when you guys are together and talking about voice.
Without further ado,
Welcome to the show.
Cool. So, Jeff, welcome to VUX World.
It's great to be here. Thank you, Kane.
Pleasure to have you. Legend in the industry.
Well, let's not press the point.
And Dustin, Jeff is close to us right now. He's in London, so we have the pleasure of him being on our, or at least similar to our time zone.
Jeff, it's great to have you here in Europe.
Yeah, it's great to be here.
So what are you here for then, Jeff?
Well, I'm en route to Vienna, Austria, where next week is the annual Interspeech conference. It's the primary speech technology conference, mostly academic focused. It's not so much a business kind of meet and greet conference, but you're going to have lots of students, graduate students, and professors, and serious speech scientists from industry, all converging. There'll be maybe a couple thousand of us there for a week in Graz, Austria, and we'll be. We're going to have 5 people there from our company, Cobalt Speech and Language, just making sure that we're on top of the latest everything.
Cool.
Jeff, what are the after parties like at an Interspeech conference?
They can be interesting. Now, it depends if it's the formal, the formal banquet after party that everyone goes to. Some of those are quite interesting, fun. Some of them can be a little stifling. But what usually also happens is that, that's only one night of the week, and the rest of the nights, people get together and say, let's go to the local bar, or let's go do something. The craziest thing I did once was I took a colleague and we said, let's just get out of town. And this conference was a few years ago in Geneva, Switzerland. And we just started driving in the afternoon and intentionally got ourselves lost and found ourselves in Italy. And then realized it took us till 6 a.m. to get back for the conference the next day.
Nice. Are you speaking then? Are you speaking at this, or are you there to soak up the learning?
I'm there to soak it all up. I'm not speaking this time.
Cool. And your stopover in London, apologies we didn't get a chance to meet in person, by the way. I know you were here again for CogX as well a few months back, wasn't it? And we kind of just missed each other, but you're kind of stopping over for a flight transfer this time.
A flight transfer and just a personal excuse to visit my son who's studying in London this semester, just for a semester abroad.
Cool. So for the people who are not aware of yourself, Jeff, you were one of the founding managers of the Acoustic Speech group, and we'll probably get into a little bit of what that entailed and what your experiences was like there. But tell the VUX World listeners a little bit about yourself and what you do.
Well, let's see. So it was about 25 years ago that I decided to leave academics and stop being a grad student and get a real job, and looked around at what was available. And I was intrigued by this idea of speech recognition. And I took a job. I moved from the west coast of the U.S. to the east coast. Took a job with a small company that was doing speech recognition. Over a series of acquisitions, that company became Nuance and Dragon, and I led the team at Nuance and Dragon that was focused on language modeling, large vocabulary, speech recognition, particularly for medical and expanding our language portfolio. It was a very interesting job. I was there for 13, 14 years, and completely on a whim, left and joined a tiny little startup in North Carolina, which may not mean anything to your UK listeners, but that's not a center of speech technology in the US. But I managed to recruit a pretty impressive team of people at this little startup company called Yap, and we did some good things and drew the attention of Amazon, who then acquired us to form the core of their Alexa team, as it was just starting out at the time. Alexa was just a vision in the mind of Jeff Bezos and a couple of senior managers there, and so we were the ones they brought in to actually make it happen. It was kind of exciting.
Wow.
How early were you brought on to Amazon before Alexa actually launched?
So it was almost exactly 3 years before the Echo was launched. It was. So I'll tell you, it was kind of interesting. We were at this small startup. We knew Amazon wanted to buy us, but we had no idea why. Why would Amazon, this shopping company, want to buy cutting edge speech technology? What was their deal with that? And we had all sorts of internal discussions and bets, but Amazon wouldn't tell us. This was such a secret project. They wouldn't tell us why they were acquiring us. And even after the acquisition was final, it was weeks before they actually told us what they had hired us to do. And they wouldn't tell us that. We were a distributed group, people working from their homes around the country in the US. And they insisted on flying everybody to Seattle, to Amazon headquarters. And they brought us in a room and they locked the door and closed the windows and swore us to secrecy and described a somewhat early version of the Amazon Echo, the device that has Alexa living inside it. And we hadn't decided at the time much about the persona of Alexa. This was just, in fact, we hadn't even decided to call it the Echo. Our internal code name for it was Doppler. So we called it the Doppler project. Even now, I feel a little bit guilty saying that word out loud because it was, for years, it was such a secret code name. But I know that Amazon has since named one of their buildings at its headquarters Doppler, named after. So the secret's out there.
So what was the reason for calling it Doppler?
That was just a code name. I think there was not much of a reason because that kind of defeats the purpose of having a code name that is obfuscating what the whole project is about. Sometimes we just shortened it and called it Project D. But let me finish my story. They brought us into the room. They told us what they wanted to do. And my heart sank because the technology for what they were describing just didn't exist yet. And I thought they're going to want us to build this thing in a couple of months, and the technology is just not there. And I approached them privately, the management afterwards, and I said, I'm really sorry. I hate to tell you this, but what you're describing can't be done, at least with today's technology. And they had a great response. They said, well, build it. It happened. They said, we're not impatient. If it takes a couple of years, it takes a couple of years. If you have to hire a bunch of people, hire a bunch of people, but make it happen. We want to invest in this. We want to see it happen. And so I spent the next 3 years until we launched, hiring like a madman. I hired 70, 80 people for the project, all like PhD level speech scientists around the world. We opened offices in Germany and England and California and Massachusetts, as well as Seattle. It was a crazy time. I built up a lot of frequent flyer miles, roaming the planet, recruiting and managing the group and so forth. But it was a wild ride and a lot of fun.
And when they were explaining to you in this darkened room, when they made you turn all your phones off and promise never to speak to it to your partners or anything, did they explain and share the vision for what the Echo is today? Or has it moved from then?
Yeah, that is a great question. I think they realized that they didn't entirely know what it would eventually become. And so one of our very first meetings, maybe the second day after we were out there, after they had defined what they want this to be, they said, now let's imagine that you have, one of these Echoes in your kitchen. And they divided us up into some different groups. And they said, okay, you 5 over here, I want you to imagine everything you could do with a machine that you could talk to and it could talk back intelligently in your kitchen. And so we were brainstorming ideas about, well, it could coach me while I'm making a recipe. It could convert measurements for me. It could serve as a shopping list. It could whatever. And then they had another 5 people that were saying, they said, okay, what could you do if you had an Echo in your garage or garage? And then we were saying, well, I don't know, I could find parts for my car that I'm working on, or I could use it to organize things in my garage. And then someone else said, what would you do in the entertainment room? So they had us all divide up and brainstorm what could we do in a business office and in different home settings and so forth. And then we rotated. We spent the whole day just brainstorming ideas. And by the end of the day, we had a list of hundreds of use cases, many of which have come to fruition. They've been implemented. And it was kind of exciting that first day. That was where we first kind of got the vision of what it was. And
what did you then, after leaving that room, and then you said you went on a mad hiring spree and you had to build the technology, what did you actually have to do? Like, what did you have? You had, presumably, you could generate some speech, but that was it. Like, what did you have to do?
Oh, let me tell you the thing that was hard about the Amazon Echo, and it will actually, this will explain a little bit why they call it the Echo. And maybe to some extent explain the name Doppler, although I think that's inadvertent. The technology at the time for speech recognition worked fine for people speaking into a microphone that was close to their mouth, that was maybe even a foot or two away from their mouth, maybe, or for your metric system listeners, half a meter away from their mouth or so. But once you got 5 or 6 feet, maybe 2 meters away from the mouth, that the microphone was that far away from the mouth in a room, the problem is that my voice doesn't just travel from my mouth to the microphone. It bounces off the window and goes to the microphone, and it bounces off the ceiling and the desk and the walls and the picture on the wall. And each of these things has a different level of hardness and size and reflective properties for the acoustics. And so the microphone is now getting 10 or 20 copies of what you said, each one of them slightly delayed from the other because of the echo delay, and each one of them slightly deformed in some way based on the properties of the thing it bounced off of. And so instead of just having one copy of the speech, you were getting 10 copies of the speech that were all a little bit transformed from each other. And the speech technology at the time just didn't know how to deal with that. Fortunately, just in the couple of years prior to this, some new technology had been introduced to speech recognition technology, and this was what's called deep learning or deep neural networks, where and they sort of mimic the way the brain works, and they did a much better job of capturing this kind of echoey audio. And we were able to train new speech recognition models using these deep neural networks. But the challenge was still in order to train those, we had to have thousands of hours of audio that was recorded by people talking in home situations in different rooms in your house, from anywhere from 2 to 20 feet away from the microphones and so forth. And so we had a massive data collection in a variety of homes with a variety of speakers and so forth to then train those models. And that the data collection took, I don't know, at least a year of the time that we were working on this. And then once we had the data collection, then there was a lot of processing required to train these neural networks. But that was clearly the secret to getting it to work. And I say, I think that's why it's appropriate that the device is called an echo, because the problem we had to solve was the problem of echoes in speech in a room sort of acoustic environment.
Wow, that is so. Was that the main thing you had to do in terms of getting the device to just hear people properly? Was that the core thing that you were working on for that whole solid year of gathering data and then the year of processing, or was there anything else you had to do as well?
Well, that was the main process, the main breakthrough, if you will, for what we call acoustic modeling. That is getting the computer to understand and recognize the different sounds that people make. So if you say a word like hello, that has the sounds he or h, eh, o, has those 4 sounds, and the computer has to recognize what does an L sound look like in the wave file when it sees it. And that was the problem we were solving here, was what does an L sound look like when it's in this reverberant, echoey environment. And so that was the primary breakthrough on that end. But the echo was much more than just recognizing speech. It was also understanding the intent of what a person was trying to say. And we had all sorts of discussions about, well, what if they, if they're trying to listen to music, what if they say, I want to listen to the Beatles' White Album? Well, the album's not listed in the catalog as the White Album. It's the official name is The Beatles, by the Beatles. And so we had, how are we going to recognize what they really mean, that they mean this album and not that album? How are we going to recognize the difference if they say stop? Did we mean stop the timer or stop the music or all these discussions about how are you going to get this voice first appliance, which wasn't a term at the time, but now it's a popular term. How are we going to get people to be able to work with this voice first technology where they don't really have a screen to touch and confirm what they meant? We really just have to understand and maybe ask for clarifications if necessary, but we want to minimize that. So there was a lot of work at the same time in how are we going to understand what they ask for? How are we going to resolve that? How are we going to figure out what to do when they ask us something? And then there was another related but parallel, different track of, look, how do we get, at the time there was more than 1 million songs in the Amazon Music library catalog. And how do we get the system to recognize so many different words? Because the 1 million songs means something like 1 million words when you look at all the different artist names, album names, song names. They're often spelled funny. I think we counted like 10 different ways that popular music songs spelled the word girls. There's a standard way, but then sometimes they spell it with a G, or sometimes G-U-R-L-Z, or G-U-R-L-Z-Z, or whatever. And how are we going to resolve all of that? And, trying to match the catalog with, what people are asking for. Anyway, there was a lot. I want to say that the acoustic modeling was probably the star of the show. It was the breakthrough that made it, that kind of made it from impossible to possible. But there was a lot of other work in natural language understanding and language modeling and dialogue management and all sorts of things.
And was your team so where did you fit in that? Was your team kind of doing the whole thing, or were you purely focusing on the speech recognition side of things?
My team was focused on pretty much all of what I just described. The speech recognition, which included the acoustic modeling and the language modeling, as well as the natural language understanding. There were other teams that did the app development of, actually integrating with the music player or actually looking up the weather or whatever. But my team was responsible for figuring out what the user said and what they meant by it.
And now on the NLU side, did you have to consider from the beginning that this was going to be opened up to third-party developers?
That was, I'm sure people were thinking about it at the time, but that was not much of an issue for us when we were focused on just launching. It was there in the background, but it was not in the foreground. At least not for my team. I'm sure there were other people who were worrying about that as part of their particular jobs.
And you mentioned that you were mentioning the acoustic modeling and trying to help the device understand the various reflections coming into it. But then you also said language modeling. Now, I think for Dustin and for a few of the developers that are listening, they probably have an understanding of what language modeling is. And designers, we're familiar with the interaction model and all that kind of terminology. But how would you describe language modeling? What does that entail?
So, if you want to think about speech recognition at its foundation, there are really 3 different models that work together to help the computer figure out the words that you said. There's the acoustic model that helps it identify the sounds of the language in the wave file, in the audio. And then there's a lexicon that knows how to piece those sounds together to make words. So if you heard, if the acoustic model thought, I heard this sound and this sound and this sound, the lexicon might say, they make a word. I know a list of words here. The language model is the part that then kind of cleans up and says, well, look, here are a lot of words that I might have heard. Which words make sense? Which words are more common? Which sequences of words make sense together? So if someone said they wanted to hear the White Album, and the lexicon and acoustic model said, well, they could have said Wide Album or White Album. The language model is going to say, well, White Album doesn't make sense. I know White Album does. So it kind of figures out which sequences of words make sense then in the audio.
Okay, so you then have to presumably figure out all of the different ways that people can say certain things, and then be able to then have almost like a a library, if you like, of all of the different permutations and ways that people can say stuff, and then you like have to reference that whenever you get some audio coming in, and you.
That's right, and that's a lot of people pay a lot of attention to the acoustic modeling. It's kind of the sexy member of the family. The language model is kind of the unsung workhorse in a lot of cases. It's a big, hairy task. To what you just described is essentially right. You've got to keep track of all of the words that people might have said. How do they make sense fitting together? And how do you resolve those? Get some way of scoring them. Traditional language modeling, if I'm just like trying to recognize and transcribe what someone said in a conversation, I do that by looking at, let's say, billions with a B, billions of words of text that that I might have collected from newspaper articles or web blogs or social media or any place I can find them. And so a big part of language modeling is collecting vast amounts of text from books and wherever, just to learn those frequencies of what words are more common, what order do they come in, what words follow other words, and so forth. And then that has to be represented in a pretty compact way. Most modern, for the super techno files out there, most modern speech recognizers use a finite state transducer to represent all of those words and their possibilities and their scores of how they follow each other. And then that's a fairly efficient way to then look that up when you're in the process of decoding what someone said.
Wow. And is that like, what did you say there? Something transducer?
Well, finite state transducer. We call them FSTs. Finite
state transducer. So what is that? Is that like essentially like a series of databases that, or something like that?
You can think of it as a big network diagram that shows every word and how you can travel from one word to the next word, and what's the score from going from this word to that word. So you can kind of track your progress through the highways of this network diagram with scores as a relatively efficient way of keeping track of what a person might have said. And as you're keeping track and listening and you realize, now the audio doesn't match anymore, you can forget that hypothesis that you were following and pay attention to one of the other 1,000 hypotheses that you were tracking. At any point in time, you're always tracking many, many different possibilities of what they might be saying, and always updating them, discarding the ones that don't make sense anymore, and so forth. It's fascinating if you're a computer science nerd like me.
So Jeff, then this is essentially taking the knowledge that people aren't original and the words are going to be in an expected order over time, and use that FST to narrow down until you have the correct one. Yeah,
or at least they're going to be original in predictable ways, in regular ways. You can still get good scores for things that you are saying for the first time in history. Just because, words tend to follow each other in certain kinds of patterns.
So is that one of the reasons then why there are still reportedly a load of people working on this, is because that's constantly evolving, constantly changing, needs to be, as new capabilities come on stream, there needs to be constantly adapting that language model?
Yeah, so I think that's... I left Amazon 5 years ago, and they don't tell me anymore what they're doing. So I can only guess what they're doing. I know they've continued to hire like crazy. When I left them, and I think the core speech science team was like 80 people, and that was bigger than any other company, any other group, any other university in the world. I thought, wow, they have enough people. I can leave. I've done my job, but I think they've I think they've multiplied that by 5, or I don't even know how big the group is, but it's a huge group now. And I think part of what they're doing is refining the standard acoustic models and language models, but using the data as people are using their Alexa devices, so that they're tracking without paying attention to you as an individual. They're tracking what are the words in what combinations, what are the most common words that are being said, what are the most common phrases that are being said, so that if you say something in an unusual way, it's going to make a note of that as, oh, that's another way to say turn off the lights, or whatever. So they're constantly training the acoustic models and the language models and the lexicon. I suppose, again, this is me, guessing from the outside, but they're constantly training those things on the ongoing data that they collect as people are using the system.
And now, so you mentioned the FST approach earlier, and that's what you approached it when you were there at Amazon. Is that still the state of the art in speech recognition, or is there anything new on the scene?
Well, so FSTs are a great way to represent language models and sort of sequence models in general when you're trying to predict what things follow other things in order to decode them. I would be shocked if Amazon weren't still using FSTs. That is the standard in the industry still. On the acoustic model side, I'm quite confident they're still using deep neural networks, although they're probably, well, in fact, I know they are exploring different configurations of those deep neural networks, of how those networks are, what the connections look like and how they're configured and how they're trained and so forth. And Amazon's pretty good about at this conference I'm going to, Interspeech, next week. I expect to see a number of papers from Amazon where they're sharing details of the improvements that they've made, which is it's kind of cool.
I see Dave Isbitsky, the chief evangelist over there, he tends to tweet them quite a lot on LinkedIn, and every now and then I think, oh, that sounds interesting, and I'll kind of get like 3 words in and I'm thinking, oh my God, I haven't got a clue what this is talking about. So you left then, you said about 5 years ago, so that was, so it must have launched then, had it? The Echo must have launched in America at that point.
Right within a week or so of when I left. Yeah, I left at the launch, essentially. Wow,
that must have been quite a proud moment, was it?
It was exciting. Do you know what? I have to tell you, we at Amazon, there were 2 sister projects. There was project, our project for the Echo, and there was another top secret project for the Amazon Fire Phone. Do you remember that?
Yeah, vaguely.
I had one.
I almost had one. I almost bought one at the last minute. I decided not to, and then I was glad later that I didn't.
Well, you could get it. You could get it on eBay for, I believe it was $90, and it came with a year of Prime. So you got a phone for $10.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I was excited about the Fire Phone. It had some really cool features, but one of the things that was just really striking to me was that at Amazon, internally, it seemed pretty clear to me that the Fire Phone was projected to be the big winner. It was going to take over the world. And this little thing we were doing, the Echo thing, was kind of a second place, maybe not quite as interesting. It might have a niche market. And the results were completely the opposite. The Fire Phone, failed and was discontinued pretty quickly. It failed commercially. I think it was still an interesting device technically, but I don't think any of us really anticipated quite how much Alexa would affect the world. That it's a household name. I no longer have to explain to people what I do. I mean, I just say, I helped build Alexa, and they, oh, okay, now I know what, because everybody knows it. Everybody knows Alexa, and it's cool.
Do you reckon that they will ever consider a rebirth of the Fire Phone under the Alexa banner.
Yeah, I would be surprised if they don't, but I don't have any inside knowledge. That's just a guess.
Yeah, they've kind of established trust now, haven't they? They've got products in people's homes. They've got reach now.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. That's right.
So that's such a good story. I'm so glad that we've kind of got to speak about that. That was absolutely wicked. But tell us now what you've moved on from Amazon, one of the founding fathers of Alexa. Very, very few people can say that. So what are you doing now at Cobalt Speech then?
Well, I'll tell you the story. When I was at Amazon, one of the things that I began to notice that within Amazon and also in connections that I had outside of Amazon, there were a number of departments or companies or people that were trying to do something innovative with speech, but they didn't have the resources to do it. And I noticed that at Amazon, the idea of the Echo is, I mean, it's a basic idea. You can describe it in just a few sentences. It's not a very complex idea, but to build it was a huge effort. And only a company like Amazon could have afforded the hundreds of millions of dollars that they had to invest in building Alexa. If you were a clever business person with a great idea for some other speech-related device, you were shut out of that. You didn't have access to the kind of speech research scientists that it would take to get a team of people to build all of that. You didn't have access to, the technology in general, because it's almost everybody in the commercial world at the time who was doing speech worked for one of the big 5 or 6 tech companies. And they weren't exactly doing projects for other companies. They were doing their own projects. And I said, there needs to be a company out there that will help other companies build the things that they want to build, that will allow the next great idea that's, as innovative as Alexa, allow them to get access to the technology. And so I left Amazon, and over the next few years, I built a team of, there's like 25 of us now at Cobalt Speech. And I'd say a little more than half of us have PhD level experience in speech engineering and speech science. And we are, we've hung out our shingle to say we will build speech technology for anyone who needs it. So now over the last 5 years, we have built a complete array of speech technology that includes state-of-the-art speech recognition, speech synthesis or text-to-speech, natural language understanding and dialogue, conversational kinds of technology. We have biometrics to recognize who's speaking. An interesting thing that we've done is we've developed technology to recognize things about the speaker. That is not just the words they're saying, but I listen to you speak. When you and I speak, we infer a lot about the other person. You'll have an idea of my age, my gender, my nationality through my accent, my level of enthusiasm, and so forth. And so we built some technology to infer those kinds of things about the speakers. And where I'm most excited is that we've spun some of that off into a separate company, Canary Speech, that is using that to detect certain diseases in people. So we can hear you speak and detect that you may have signs of Alzheimer's or Parkinson's or other handful of other diseases that manifest themselves through your voice. So, sorry, I'm getting a little bit. I'm probably saying more than you wanted me to say. I'm going on because I'm so excited about this. So at Cobalt, the short story is we've developed a whole broad range of speech and language technology, and then we use that to build things for our partners and clients, whoever they are.
It's interesting you mention Canary Speech, because as luck would have it, I happened to get introduced to Henry, your friend over there, and he's actually going to be on the podcast in I can't remember when it's booked in for now. I was just checking there as you were speaking. It's in the next couple of weeks, basically. When is it? 1st of October we're doing the recording, so it'll be out a couple of weeks after that. So we're going to be talking all about that as well.
That's very cool. Yeah, so the story there is that Henry was working with us here at Cobalt. He was VP of Business Development here, and he and I were talking. We said, someone needs to be doing this, disease classification through speech. And we finally just said, well, let's just do it. Let's just found a separate company and go after it. And so that's what they're doing. I'm very excited about what they're up to.
Yeah, so we'll learn a lot more about that in the coming weeks. Go on, Dustin.
How does Cobalt work? Is this a SDK that people are adding it to their devices or the apps? Is it a platform that they're hitting via API? What's going on when we engage with Cobalt?
Yeah, thank you. That's a great question. So there are two answers to the question. I'm going to give you the simple answer first. The simple answer is yes. Our speech recognizer, you can license it from us. There's a simple API. It's quite accurate. We have it available in a handful of languages, and we're developing more all the time. And so you can install it. You can run it on your own server. You can run it on your own embedded device if you need to, as long as it has enough power, compute power, and so forth. So that's the short answer is yes, we license this technology with APIs. There you go. The more complex answer is that almost all of our customers come to us not wanting just a speech recognizer. They want a product that is something more interesting. Maybe they want a way for their customers to control their complicated photocopy machine by voice, just to throw out an example. That's not a real example. I'm still waiting for a photocopy company to come and hire for that. But photocopy machines are an example of a machine that can baffle even the most sophisticated user with all of the capabilities and so forth. So imagine how convenient it would be to be able to walk up to one and say, I need 32 copies, double-sided, collated in a certain way, and stapled on the right top corner or whatever. And you just say that, and it knows what to do, and it does it. So a lot of the projects we work on are something like that, where a company will engage us to build, where we will put something together using the building blocks of the tools that we've already developed. So we will, we'll integrate with their system. We'll train their people on how to use it. They may want it, maybe they want it running locally on the photocopier, and the photocopier is, we have to get it to run on that operating system and so forth. So there's a lot of customization that goes into almost all of the projects that we do. But it's not required. It's just that those are the people that tend to come to us. There are other places where you can go and get speech recognition if you just want simple speech recognition. They come to us if they need something customized, or if they want more control over it, like they don't want to send their speech up through the cloud to someone else's servers.
And is that then the customization aspect? Is that all around the kind of dialogue design side of things? So in that kind of copier example, you need to know what it means when someone says 30 pages. Is it to do that level of configuration, or is it to actually get help with the back end side of stuff? What is it predominantly that they want customizing?
So different customers that we work with will want different levels of support from us. Typically, we do the full thing. We design the dialogues, we design all of those pieces with the customer's participation. We don't isolate ourselves. We work with them closely, and that's one of the things I love about Cobalt, is that we've done so many projects with people in so many different industries that now I feel like, I've contributed to, the manufacturing industry and education and entertainment and finance and all these different industries, and we've had to learn something about each of those industries along the way, it's kind of fun. I never get bored. Every day I come to work, not sure what I'm going to learn about that day.
Who are the people that you're working with inside these companies? What titles are coming to you and you're collaborating with?
It depends a lot on the size of the company. If it's like a Fortune 50 company, then it'll be some maybe a director. But if it's a lot of our customers are startups, and they might only have 5 people in the company, and so we're usually in that case dealing directly with the founder or the CEO, or maybe their whole team to define what we're going to do. And that's what what an engagement usually that's the form it takes, is that they'll have a team of people on their end. They'll talk to us. We'll have a couple of people, and we will jointly figure out, okay, here's what you want to have done. Here's how we can do it. Let's lay out a proposal. That'll take you 3 months, and it'll cost you so many dollars. And then we go forward and do it together with them. We really like to view ourselves as development partners with our customers, as opposed to just throw something over the wall at them. We like to work with them and be part of their team as they're developing this, rolling it out, and so forth.
How much voice experience do the customers have already when they come to you?
That has surprised me. Many of them have had absolutely no experience, and many others have actually substantial. We've worked with a number of speech companies whose names I cannot reveal for obvious reasons, but we worked with a number of speech companies who felt that they were falling behind and hired us to help them catch up with the state of the art. It runs the gamut. A lot of the people we work with, they know speech. They're talented. They've got degrees in speech. They've got years of experience, but they need us to augment their staff, help them get up to the latest state of the technology. And then others know absolutely nothing, and they just say, help. We don't know what to do, but we have this vision for a product or a service or whatever.
You mentioned that you've worked in a number of different industries and different sectors, and obviously it seems as though you're working with many different types of people with different levels of knowledge. Can you speak to any of the I know you might not necessarily be able to name names, but can you speak to some of the examples of some of the stuff that you have worked on, either recently or in the past, or any interesting things in particular that you think are worthy of sharing?
I'll give you a couple of examples. Sure. So one of those that I mentioned already was Canary Speech, this idea of detecting diseases through the way people are speaking. That's fascinating, but I've said enough about that. I won't say more now. We have another customer we're working with that is working to reduce or modify the accents of people who might be working in a call center in India or Pakistan or Indonesia or somewhere, so that they sound more American or British or whatever the target, whatever the customer is, so that it's a little bit less off-putting or alienating. It's more comfortable for the customer to deal with the person. That's an interesting project that we're working on. Another one that we're working on is developing a conversational assistant for agriculture workers, so that someone who goes out into the field and is inspecting the corn crop, for example, that their hands are dirty, their hands are full of equipment and instruments and things that they're using to measure the moisture in the soil or whatever, and they've hired us to develop a conversational assistant, a hands-free assistant, so that they can record their findings, perhaps ask questions and so forth, because their hands are busy, that they can't easily type on a phone and whatever where they are. I'll give you one more example without naming any names. We've talked to a couple of different and actually done work, not just done work with a couple of companies to develop hands-free voice-activated controls for medical surgery equipment. When a doctor is in the middle of surgery, that's another case where they can't necessarily take their hands out of the patient and turn the knobs, and then go back to the patient. And so it's convenient to be able to say things like, turn up the lights or focus the light over here or whatever. So that's another example. Anyway, there are a lot of really fascinating projects. I'll be honest, most of the most interesting ones I can't say anything about.
Such a tease.
Yeah, exactly. So, but maybe they'll come to light sometime soon, and we'll be able to talk about them.
Okay. Well, maybe we'll have to do another one of these then. Once that happens, and if you're able to speak about some of the things that may be coming down the pipe after they've came down the pipe, then maybe we'll do this again.
That sounds very good. I would like that.
Jeff, it's been absolutely amazing. We won't keep you any longer. I know you've got some catching up to do before your flight, and good luck at the conference. And thank you so much for joining us. Where can people find out more about Cobalt Speech and either reach out to you if they want to work with you or find out more about what you've been working on?
Well, they can always go to our website, www.cobaltspeech.com. They can send an email to info@cobaltspeech.com, and we have a presence in most of the social media platforms. We just 2 weeks ago started a blog, so they may be able to read up on some of what we're doing there as well as over the weeks.
Fantastic. We'll put those links in the show notes. I don't know about you, Dustin, but I think this has been absolutely unbelievable.
It's been fantastic. Thanks so much, Jeff.
Dustin, Kane, it was my pleasure. I really enjoyed talking with both of you.
That was Jeff Adams, and I am speechless. What a story that was. We didn't intend to get into that level of detail on that story, but that has essentially just pretty much documented the creation of the thing that we'd spend most of our time talking about, which is Alexa. Jeff, one of the founding fathers, and just to hear that journey and how it was all kind of brought about and how they introduced it to the team after they were acquired, and the level and sheer vast amounts of research and work and effort that went in to getting those microphones to just hear what you are saying is unbelievable. And the fact that they called it the Echo because of that fact that it was getting reverberations from all around the room and 20 odd signals coming into one microphone and trying to differentiate which one's which and put them all together to understand it. Honestly, absolutely unbelievable. And what we just said at the end there as we clocked off, that Cobalt Speech, essentially what Jeff's managed to do by the sounds of things is take all of that learning from Amazon and from Alexa, pump it into his own kind of platform, and now if anybody wants any kind of assistant to do anything, any kind of speech recognition at all, and you don't want to use Alexa or Google Assistant or Dialogflow or whatever, then you can just go to Cobalt Speech and essentially have yourself a completely unique, personalised, handcrafted assistant to put anywhere you want, in products, on websites, anywhere. Unbelievable. Jeff, thank you so much. Dustin, as always, cheers. And as always, boys and girls, thank you all for listening. Until next time, see you later.